Professor Karthix had seen many things in his 300 cycles of teaching at the Galactic Forge Academy. He had witnessed Vraxian students accidentally melt their workbenches. He had watched Quillen apprentices construct blades so perfectly balanced they could slice through diamond-reinforced steel. He had even survived the incident of 2847 when a Horgoth student somehow managed to set water on fire. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the human girl named Riley Moss. The morning started normally enough. Well, as normal as things could be when you taught 73 different species how to not kill themselves with sharp objects. Karthix's 4 eyes scanned the workshop, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking softly as he moved between the forge stations. The assignment was simple, really. Laughably simple. Create a blade using traditional methods. Heat, hammer, cool, sharpen. Even a Glibner could do it. And those creatures had the cognitive capacity of burnt toast. Attention, students, Karthix announced, his translator converting his natural clicking sounds into standard galactic common. Today marks your final examination in fundamental metallurgy. You have 12 standard hours to forge a functional blade. The materials have been provided. Your ancestors survived with less. Surely you can manage with more. The sarcasm was lost on most of them, but a few of the sharper species, the Kelrothi and the Vosperi, appreciated his wit. They always did. The workshop erupted into organized chaos. Furnaces roared to life. Hammers began their rhythmic clanging. The smell of heated metal filled the air, mixing with the ozone scent of plasma cutters and the acrid tang of quenching oil. Karthix observed with satisfaction. This was the symphony of creation, and he was its conductor. Then he noticed Riley. The human sat at her station, Station 42, and she was not moving toward the metal stock. No, instead, she had produced something from her personal storage unit. Something white. Something that made Karthix's antenna twitch with confusion that he approached, careful to keep his skepticism in check. Humans were new to the Galactic Federation, only recently having been deemed advanced enough to attend the Academy. They were strange creatures, these bipedal mammals. Fragile-looking, yet surprisingly resilient. Emotional, yet capable of cold calculation. They confused the hell out of most species, if Karthix was being honest. "Student Riley," he said, stopping at her workbench. "Might I inquire as to why you are holding what appears to be organic matter?" Riley looked up at him with those unsettling binocular eyes humans possessed. She smiled, which Karthix had learned meant she was either happy or about to do something incredibly stupid. Sometimes both. "It is a bone, Professor Karthix," she said cheerfully. "Specifically, a femur from a Terran ungulate we call cattle. I brought it from home." Silence fell in the immediate vicinity. Several students had stopped their work to stare. A Quillen named Vex actually dropped his hammer. The metallic clang echoed through the sudden quiet like a death knell. "A bone," Karthix repeated slowly. "You intend to create a blade from bone?" "Yes, sir. For a metallurgy exam." "That is correct. An exam about forging metal. I am aware of the parameters, Professor." Karthix felt a headache forming behind his primary eyes. "Humans. Why did it always have to be humans?" "Student Riley, the assignment specifically requires the use of provided materials. Those materials are metal. Alloys, to be precise. Not," he gestured with one of his 6 appendages. "Not skeletal remains from your bizarre mammalian livestock." Riley's smile did not falter. In fact, it somehow got wider. More terrifying. "Professor, with respect, the assignment states we must forge a functional blade using traditional methods. You did not specify it had to be metal. You said materials were provided, but you did not say we were limited to only those materials. I checked the syllabus 3 times. Oh, this was bad. Karthix could feel it in his secondary nervous system. This was the kind of semantic argument that humans loved, the kind that technically followed the rules while completely violating their spirit. He had heard about this from other professors. The warnings in the faculty lounge. Human students were creative, dangerously so. Furthermore, Riley continued, and by the Great Hive, she was still talking. Humans have been creating bladed weapons from bone for roughly 2 million years. It is perhaps the most traditional method we have. More traditional than metal working, actually. Our ancestors were sharpening bone weapons before we even discovered fire. A murmur rippled through the workshop. 2 million years. That predated most species' recorded history. Several students exchanged glances. The Horgoth in the corner, A massive creature named Brux actually laughed. It sounded like rocks in a tumbler. Karthix's mandibles clicked in irritation. The spirit of the assignment, the letter of the assignment, Riley interrupted gently, says nothing about material composition. Only functionality and traditional methods. I promise you, Professor, what I create will be both functional and traditional. He should say no. He really should. But there was something in those strange human eyes. A challenge. A spark. And Karthix, despite his better judgment, was curious. Humans had fought their way from primitive bone weapons to stellar civilization in a geological blink. They had gone from clubbing animals to death to building faster-than-light engines in less than 10,000 cycles. What kind of species did that? The insane kind, probably. Very well, Karthix said, and immediately regretted it. You may proceed. However, if your bone instrument fails the functionality test, you will fail this examination. Am I understood? Crystal clear, Professor. Riley immediately set to work, and Karthix watched with mounting fascination and horror. She produced a set of tools that looked disturbingly primitive. Rough stones, abrasive materials, a strange leather strap. While her classmates heated metal to glowing temperatures, Riley simply sat at her bench and began to grind. The sound was awful, like nails on chitin. But she worked with intense focus, her movements precise and deliberate. Around her, the workshop returned to its previous state of controlled pandemonium, but Karthix found himself returning again and again to Station 42. Hours passed. Metal cooled. Blades took shape. And through it all, Riley just kept grinding that bone, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, shaping death from calcium and collagen. Human beings, Karthix decided, were absolutely terrifying, and the exam was only half over. 8 hours into the examination, and Karthix was developing what humans would call a very bad feeling about this entire situation. The workshop had settled into a productive rhythm. Tog, a methodical Vraxian, was applying the final polish to a respectable short sword. Mira, one of the few other humans in the class, had forged a traditional Terran-style knife that actually showed decent craftsmanship. Even Brux the Horgoth, despite his species' notorious impatience, had managed to create a cleaver that looked like it could bisect a small shuttle. And then there was Riley at Station 42. The bone had transformed. What had started as a yellowed, unremarkable piece of organic material now gleamed with a soft, almost luminous quality. She had shaped it into something between a dagger and a short sword, maybe 30 centimeters long. The edge caught the light in ways that made Karthix's survival instincts twitch uncomfortably. Time, he announced finally, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. Cease all work. Step away from your stations. The students complied, most wearing expressions ranging from confident to desperately hopeful. Riley simply set down her leather strap and flexed her fingers, which Karthix noticed were raw and bleeding slightly. Humans and their ridiculous pain tolerance. She had been grinding for 8 consecutive hours. The testing phase will now commence, Karthix declared. Each blade will be evaluated for structural integrity, edge retention, and practical functionality. We will proceed in station order. The first dozen tests went smoothly enough. Blades cut. Metal held. A few failures, of course. Poor Zix had somehow created a sword that bent like rubber, which was actually impressive in its own terrible way. Station 37 produced a blade that shattered immediately, sending fragments across the room and causing a brief evacuation. Standard stuff, really. Then they reached Station 42. Riley stepped forward, holding her bone blade with both hands in a presentation grip. Up close, Karthix could see the incredible detail work. She had carved a simple crossguard from the wider portion of the bone. The grip showed careful texturing for improved hold. The blade itself tapered to a point that looked sharp enough to split atoms. Student Riley, Karthix said formally, present your work for examination. She handed it to him, and he nearly dropped it. Not from weight, the opposite actually. The thing was impossibly light, far lighter than any metal blade of comparable size. He turned it over in his appendages, studying it from multiple angles. His professional assessment warred with his personal disbelief. The structural integrity test first, he announced. This involved striking the blade against a standardized anvil with controlled force. It was designed to reveal hidden fractures or weak points in the metallurgy. Metal rang. Metal held or broke. Simple, Karthix brought the bone blade down hard. The sound that resulted was not the ring of metal. It was sharper, higher-pitched, almost musical. The blade rebounded without visible damage. He struck it again, harder. Same result. Around him, students pressed closer, fascination overcoming protocol. Edge retention test, Karthik said. His tone carefully neutral. He drew the blade across a steel rod designed to dull inferior edges. Good blades could make 3 cuts before showing wear. Excellent blades managed 5. Riley's bone weapon cut through 7 attempts without perceptible dulling. The workshop had gone completely silent. Even Brooks had stopped his usual fidgeting. Mira, the other human, was grinning like she knew something the rest of the class did not. Functionality test, Karthik said quietly. This was the final exam. A blade must cut. Simple as that. He produced a standard ballistic gel cylinder, designed to simulate organic tissue. A functional blade should penetrate at least 15 centimeters with reasonable force. Riley's bone blade slid through the entire 50-centimeter cylinder like it was not even there. By the Great Hive, someone whispered. Karthix thought it might have been him. He cleared his throat, or the equivalent for his species. Student Riley, explain your process. Riley's expression was difficult to read. Pride, maybe? Or just exhaustion. Bone is a composite material, Professor. Calcium phosphate crystals embedded in collagen protein fibers. Humans have been working with it for millions of years. We understand its properties intimately. She gestured to the blade. I selected a weight-bearing bone for density. The grinding process aligned the internal structure, similar to how folding steel aligns grain patterns. The edge was honed using progressively finer abrasives until it reached a monomolecular sharpness. The result is a weapon that is light, flexible, incredibly sharp, and yes, functional. Monomolecular, Karthix repeated faintly. The edge is approximately 1 molecule thick at the point of contact, Professor. It is a technique human craftsmen developed about 40,000 years ago. We used it on hunting implements. 40,000 years. They had been making molecular edge weapons for 40,000 years. Before most species had left their home planets. Before the Quillen had invented writing. Before the Vraxians had discovered mathematics, humans had been creating weapons of horrifying efficiency while living in caves. This is insane, Vex said, speaking what everyone was thinking. How did your species survive long enough to reach space? You were making these things to hunt animals. Riley shrugged. Mostly. Sometimes each other, honestly. Humans are very creative when it comes to violence. It is sort of our thing. Sort of your thing, Brooks repeated slowly. She says it is sort of their thing. The murder apes created molecular blades from their food waste as a hobby. To be fair, Riley said helpfully, we also invented agriculture, music, art, and democracy. We are multifaceted. Karthix felt like he needed to sit down. Unfortunately, his species did not really sit so much as anchor. Student Riley, your blade passes all functionality requirements. It exceeds them, actually, by a margin that I find deeply concerning. Does that mean I pass? You pass. You pass so thoroughly that I am going to recommend your technique be added to the advanced curriculum. You also pass so thoroughly that I am filing a formal report with the Academy Board about human baseline capabilities. Riley beamed. Thank you, Professor. That was not a compliment. That was barely disguised existential dread. The rest of the evaluations passed in a blur. Karthix barely registered them. His mind kept returning to that bone blade, currently resting on his evaluation desk like an accusation. When the session finally ended, students filing out in various states of celebration or disappointment, Mira approached him. Professor Karthix, a moment. Student Mira, are all humans like her? Mira laughed. Riley? Oh no. She is actually fairly conservative by human standards. You should see what happens when we get really creative. I am not sure my cardiac system could handle it. Probably for the best. Mira smiled. That same unsettling human expression. For what it is worth, Professor, you are handling first contact with human ingenuity pretty well. Most species need therapy. She left, and Karthix was alone with his thoughts and one impossibly sharp bone blade. Humans, he decided, were going to change everything. The Galactic Federation had encountered hundreds of species. Warriors, scientists, diplomats, artists. But humans seemed to be all of those things simultaneously, wrapped in a package of barely controlled chaos and terrifying competence. They had joined the galactic community with smiles and handshakes and promises of cooperation. And they had done it while casually carrying 2 million years of weaponized evolutionary creativity in their back pockets. Karthix picked up the bone blade one more time, studying his reflection in its impossibly sharp edge. The galaxy, he thought, had no idea what was coming, and honestly, neither did he. But it was definitely going to be interesting. So what did you think? Did this story surprise you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing science fiction stories every week. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.